Hi there, I'm Kurtis Pyrah. Graduated from high school, Carey High School in 1960, some 61 years ago. I was born in Haley, but spent the first 25 years of my life in Carey, going through the school system and working on the farm, which is what I wanted to do when I grew up, was to be a farmer. But that never worked out. And we'll tell you a little more about that a little later. My dad and mom was Alumni Panther, and my mother was Jean Alexis Hurst Pyrah. I'll tell you a little bit about my dad. He was born and raised in Carey, spent his entire life in Carey, except for a year at the CCC camp in northern Idaho and a year at the University of Idaho. He's majored in music. A little story I'd like to tell about him was that that year that he spent in Moscow at the university, he was staying in a boarding house, and there was a young lady that was there, the daughter of the boarding house manager, and they were getting pretty serious by the time the spring semester came around at the end, and he had been offered a contract to sing at the Spokane radio station that summer, and if he would have, and it would have paid him enough money to go another year at the University of Idaho. He decided, no, I think I'll go home and help my dad. He really needs my help. Well, that summer he met my mother, Jean. They got married, and they never went back. But I wondered all of my life, I says, where would I have been if he'd have taken that job in Spokane? So that's a little story that is interesting in my dad's part. My dad was quite a singer. He probably sang at every 24th of July program and every funeral for 35 years. And my mother had an interesting beginning. She was born and raised in Idaho, or in Arco, moved to Fish Creek with her family, and then when she was the age of 6, her mother died. And from that point until she was in high school, she would go summer at one relation's place, aunt or uncle, and then whoever could afford to put her in school, that's where she would spend her school. And Stella Hurst was an aunt of Jean's, and she ran this post office in Carey. And she was a single lady, so they thought that she could afford to have Jean in high school. So that's where she was at in the 4 years she was in high school. But my dad was already out of high school, so she never really met him or never saw him. And when she was a senior on the 24th or the 4th of July in Haley, that's where they met, and they were married a year later. In 1939, I think that's correct, was when they were married, the height of the Depression. They moved into a 18 by 16 square foot house, which was actually a granary, and half of the building was made up of oats and barley. So, you know, they didn't really have a good thing until they moved into what is called the Carey Schoolhouse. In the late 1930s, they consolidated all of the one-room schoolhouses in the valley and moved some of the buildings into where the high school had been built. This high school had been built in 1920. And that's where my dad went to school, where he played basketball, where I went to school, where I played basketball. And some of those one-room schoolhouses were moved into the south side of the high school. One of the buildings I remember was moved in about 1953 or 4, somewhere in there. From Peekaboo. It was a Peekaboo building, and it was on the west side of the house, or the east side of the high school. Now, the ag building was there when I was in high school, and as I understand it's still there and still being used. So that was an interesting bit of the history there. So I went to school in one of those one-room schoolhouses that had been moved into next to the high school. B.L. Judy went to Ticura. If you know where Ticura is, it's The reason they call it Taikura is because there's a railroad siding right there in South Carey called Taikura. So that's what they call the Taikura Schoolhouse. It's down there by where Irv Cook and Garth Cook used to live, way down just before you leave the Carey Valley. Anyway, B.L. Judy moved the house up to where my brother John lives now. And that was a 160-acre homestead that my grandfather homesteaded way back in the 30s. And my dad and mom lived there the rest of their entire life once they were married. I was not part of the granary building that I called it. They moved in the Taikura Schoolhouse in 1941, and I was born the following spring of 1942. To give you some perspective, the Second World War was only 4 months old when I was born. If you remember in your history, Colonel Doolittle bombed Tokyo off the carrier Enterprise, I believe it was, 10 days after I was born. To give you some perspective of how old I am. I spent all of my school years in Carey. In the 5th and 6th grade were in the Peekaboo building. The 1st grade was with Mrs. Smith. Elmer Smith's wife. Elmer Smith had a farm way down in South Carey just before you leave the valley by the Cooks. I don't know who owns that now, but the next year, my 2nd grade, was a Mrs. Olson. Mrs. Olson was the husband of Cecil Olson, and she was also the daughter of William O. Patterson, Craig Patterson's aunt. And she was one of my favorite teachers as far as that goes. In the 2nd grade, they called me over to, Mrs. Olson called me in just before recess, and I knew I was in trouble because she doesn't call you up and hold you over for recess just because you are not a good kid, you know. And she wanted me to sing a song, Bicycle Built for Two. And so I did. Marie Cameron was the girl that I was singing the song to, Bicycle Built for Two, and I don't believe it was a Christmas program, but it was similar to that, and I pushed a tricycle out on the stage in the old high school and sang Bicycle Built for Two. And the next year, they thought I did such a good job that I had Marie again. Only this time I was on a bicycle, and I had to struggle to pull her and the bicycle out on the stage. But I did sing the Bicycle Built for Two. Maybe they thought I was a good singer because my dad was a good singer. 5th and 6th grade, Mrs. Bing, I remember Mrs. Bing, Billingsley, Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson. In the 7th grade, I was in the lower half of the high school. In the 8th grade, I was in the upper story of the building, on the east side end of the high school. I don't suppose you would ever know any of the old high school. It was torn down in 1964. It had been there, 40 some years, and to make way for the new school, or the elementary and high school combination, in 1965. Anyway, and then I had several teachers in high school. Probably my favorite, I had actually 3 favorites. Mr. Day, Bob Day, because I wanted to be an agriculture person. I wanted to go home and be the farmer, just like I'd been for the first 20 years of my life. And he taught me a great deal. He treated me as though I was somebody special. And I really liked that part. Mr. Cook was another person that treated me well. He's also my first cousin. And he had been on a mission to Samoa And so in order to go to a Samoa, you had to have a teacher's certificate. And so that's what he did. And Ronald Peck was the same way. He went to Tonga on a teacher's certificate. And while they were there, they were paid, so they were able to have a mission without actually costing them anything. And when Ronald Peck got back from Tonga, then he started teaching music. And he was one of my favorite teachers too. I really didn't have a special one teacher, but those three were my special people. I was in the band for 6 years, and he was my band teacher, and he was a good one too. After high school in 1960, I went to Ricks College and spent the first year there. Never really dated anybody, never really was, however, I did, with Mr. Cook, one of the things he did was to have school plays. And I was in 4 school plays in high school. So when I got to college, the opportunity came to be in the college plays. So I was in 3 of the college plays at Ricks College. To give you some idea of how big Ricks College was at the time, there was 830 people. 830 students. Those people coming from Idaho Falls thought that they were being terribly put upon because there was 1,100 students in the Idaho Falls High School. And so they said, well, boy, I'm going down to the Ricks College. But it was a good time. I lived in an apartment basement just off the college campus. That house is still there. It's just across the street from, I think, what they called the Student Union building, where the old football field used to be. In 1961, I came back to Carey to get ready, and I assumed I would be called to mission on a mission that summer of 1961. No call came. So I said, well, I'll get ready to go back to school. And then one of the counselors to the bishopric says, have you been calling Kurt on a mission yet? No, I haven't. So I was called by the bishop, interviewed by the bishop and the stake president within a week, and interviewed by Ezra Taft Benson at the stake conference in the 1st of September. And the reason that Ezra Taft Benson was there was because his brother, Valdo Benson, had a farm there and was the stake president of the Blaine stake, and the headquarters being in Carey. They moved the headquarters to Richfield because Richfield did not have a building, and until Valdo came along and provided them, or the stake pitched in and built the Richfield Chapel, and they moved the stake center down to Richfield for a few years. And then after I don't remember the years, but after I got back from my mission, then they moved it back to Carey and created a Carey stake rather than the Blaine County stake. So I was in the mission field from November 22nd, 1961 till November 1963. Moved around. They had 5 missions when I was first there. I was in the British mission, which had London as the mission headquarters. Hyde Park Chapel. Elder Holland, who happened to be in the mission with me, happened to be and came back just a few years ago and rededicated the Hyde Park Chapel because it was brand new when he and I were in the mission field in London. The Hyde Park Chapel was built there, and it had a really nice organ. And the members or the church that was taking organ classes in London would then have a recital 3 or 4 times a week in the Hyde Park Chapel as part of the missionary program. And if they gave those recitals, then they were allowed to be paid part of their tuition to take those organ lessons. Anyway, in 1963, then I was released. I was not released. In those days, the stake president released you. They had changed that while I was in the mission field. And so I had the opportunity to either go fly home or to go home on the Queen Mary, boat the Queen Mary. Well, I'd never been on a Queen, never been on a boat. And so I said, well, I'll do that. And we took a week coming back on the Queen Mary. Yeah, it was very nice. Went to movies every day, twice a day, had really good food. Our food in England was not really good, I would say. And there was, I think, 14 of us elders on the Queen Mary, and we became known as the biggest eaters in the whole cruise, because we loved that American food that they were serving. Got to England, or got back to New York from the Queen Mary. Went to, flew from New York to Denver, and then changed planes and went from there to Salt Lake City. Missed my flight to Haley Airport, so I had to stay overnight and walked around the church office buildings, which was not the big buildings that you have now, but it was the real old building. Went up into the Hotel Utah. When we were missionaries training, we were training in Salt Lake City rather than BYU. 2 years later, they had tore down the Mission Training Center, and I believe they built the Reef Society building where it was at. And so then I went from there from Salt Lake City back to Haley, and this was in 1963, late December. Could not get to the stake president. We could never get coordinated to the point where we could get together and be released. So I'm still a missionary. I dated, had a wife and children, still missionary. Never was released, which I guess is a good thing because I enjoy the missionary work. Linda and I have been on several missions. After I got back from the mission field in December, I got into Carey. We decided that I would spend the spring with my dad and get the crops in, and then spend the summer helping with the crops, and then the following year get back to Rexburg in school. However, the draft board says, well, if you don't go to school, we're going to draft you. So I says, well, maybe I better go to school. So I went to school, the spring of 1964, and majored in agriculture. I found out that the agriculture program at Ricks College wasn't very good. I knew more about how to run a farm than the people who was trying to teach me to run a farm. I went back again that following fall of 1964. Did some more agriculture, and I always had a problem with the fact that agriculture says, well, you got to do algebra 2. You have to have chemistry. You have to have biology. Well, how is all of those things going to help me milk a cow or plow a field? Anyway, in 1965, the spring of 1965, I met, I guess you would call it. My wife and I were singing in the college choir, and she wanted to sing in the tenor section, sitting right next to me. So I says, well, okay, you can't sing in the tenor section because you're an alto. So she managed to sit in the alto section right next to me. I was singing in the tenor section. We began dating, and the rest of it is history, I guess you say. Asked her to marry me in February of 1965. And we were married in July of that year. Our first home was the Carey Motel. I'm not sure whether many people remember the Carey Motel. The post office at that point in time in 1965 was right across the road to the north from the apartment building that we were spending our summer of 1965 in. That particular building used to be the John Deere dealership. Yeah. My dad bought a John Deere there, but there's a whole story about John Deere's that I probably won't say here because it'd take me too long to talk about it. Adamson's had internationals, and there was always this fight between the John Deere's and internationals. John Deere's always won, but that's the way it is. And so in 1965, I decided I was going to be a farmer, and I was going to work with my dad, and well, that didn't work out. He was not ready to share the farm or even sell the farm or have a partnership, so I went to work at the Texaco station. Then my father-in-law says, I could work with him in Grable on his farm, and we could form a partnership. That didn't work out either. So in 1972, I moved back to Carey, moved into the Payne Ranch, where Dick Payne used in that area. Oliver Payne had part of the ranch, and Sam Payne had the other part. They were from Albion. They had moved up there and started farming up there. Dad was leasing the place, and so they had this house on Payne Ranch, and so that's where we spent our first for the next 5 years. And then in 1972, I got a job at the cheese factory, Carey Cheese Factory. Kraft Foods owned a cheese plant there. They had actually owned the cheese plant there for several years. The old, the Carey office buildings used to be a cheese factory, or not a cheese factory, but a creamery, what they called a creamery. A creamery was where you took your milk, they separated it, took the cream off, sent that away, and then the milk was given back to you to feed to your pigs or whatever else you wanted to use it for. They moved it then to where it's located now, or was located, and started making cheese. When I went to work there, they were making 5 vats a day, or 22,000 pounds of vat, and then 2 years later they were down to 3 vats a day. That's 6,600 pounds of cheese. Not very much. They decided to remodel. They went from a 40-pound block to a 680-pound block with a railroad track. You had to push the boxes around. And we went from 3 vats a day to 14 vats a day. And that would be about 140,000 pounds of milk every day. It would be about 50,000 pounds of cheese every day. So that was a truckload every day. And we were doing real well. But then Kraft sold the plant to the Ward's brothers in 1990, and then the Ward's brothers sold it to Avonmore in 1991, and then in 1992, Avonmore closed the cheese plant in Carey. I could have moved to Gooding and gone to work at the cheese factory down there, or to Richfield, which had been converted into a whey plant rather than a cheese plant. Couldn't really fit my hand around that, so I took the severance package and went to work for Sun Valley Company, and worked for bus driving, ski bus back and forth to the mountain for a year, and then went to the house mechanics job, which paid more money, and was a 10-hour day, 4 days a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. No, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 4 days, and then I had Thursday, Friday, and Saturday off. But that wasn't enough money, and so I took spare jobs. I drove milk truck for Paul and whey truck for Paul, and worked for the Peekaboo Livestock Company, hauling sprinkler parts. developed a mowing business. Did that for 20 years. It was there was a time when I was driving a shuttle bus from Sun Valley to Boise Airport, transporting people back and forth, and I got a letter telling me, you're spending too many hours. I was spending 70 to 75 hours a week working, and it says you can't do that and still drive the bus. So I had to back off a little bit. But that's the one thing that I did. When I finally retired, I got to thinking back, there was never a time that I did not have at least 50 hours a week working. And I think this is one thing that young people need to understand and know. The 40-hour week is a myth. You just can't do a 40-hour week and survive. Unless, of course, you're very smart, which I wasn't. And my kids now they will all work more than a 40-hour week, but they get paid pretty well too. After I retired in 2003 was when I retired from Sun Valley Company, and went to work again, more than 40 hours a week, drove the Carey School bus, did the lawn mowing business, and many of the people in the valley wanted me to fix their sprinkler systems or work on their farms because they needed the help. And so Linda and I have been busy, and our kids have been busy too, which I think is one of the things that we need to understand, is that the more you work, the better off you are. And this idea of spending all your time in front of a video game, it just is not a productive way of living your life. Retired in 2008, Linda and I decided we wanted to do a senior couple mission. Went to Stevens Point, Wisconsin. A little side story on Stevens Point, Wisconsin. When the Saints moved to Nauvoo, Illinois, there was virtually nothing there, and they needed lumber to build their homes. And so the prophet Joseph Smith had a mission established in Wisconsin, whereby they went up there and cut logs down and floated them down the Mississippi River to Nauvoo, where they were then taken out of the river and sawn up to make wood. And Stevens Point was where that was at. The reason it was called Stevens Point is because Stevens had a bar there for all of the lumber people. The story of Wisconsin is that every tree has been cut down at least 5 times in the last 200 years in Wisconsin. Right now they have a huge paper mill factory around there, and that's what they do with their lumber. In 2008 and 9 and 10, we came back in the spring of 2010, spent 9 months at home, kind of getting everything back together again, and then Spencer Ellsworth, who was the mission president of the Mesa Mission, decided that he needed some help in the office. So he called us up and asked us if we wouldn't want to come down there and be mission couples in the office. And so that's what we did for the next 18 months. And got home, what would it be? 2013, in the summer of 2013. And decided, no, it was 2012. Decided that, you know what, we needed to move to Nampa, or at least to the Boise Valley. Let me tell you a little story about that. At the cheese factory, we were taking the Boise paper, and in the morning, in the morning break, you read the front page and the second page, and in lunchtime, you read the middle parts of the section, but towards the second break time in the afternoon, you're back to the personal pages and the want ads and that kind of stuff. I found a picture of a girl with a bandage on her foot, and it turns out that she had been injured by her grandfather's rototiller. She had got something tangled up in the rototiller. Wait a minute. He was out in his garden, tilling his garden, on the 16th of February. I'm going to move where I can be in my garden the 16th of February. And that's why I moved to the Boise Valley. We did that in 2013, bought this house. We were just talking a minute ago about the house that we raised 7 kids in, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. We moved into a house in Nampa, Idaho that had 4 bedrooms and 3 full bathrooms and a 3-car garage. We're doing well. We're still getting by, and at this point in my life, I'm getting more money than I've ever made in my life, which is a good thing. The thing I'm most proud about, outside of my wife and her ability to raise a wonderful family, was my children. Very proud of them. If you were to take a tour of the house, you will see that there have been many items that they have said, well, you know what, you need this, so I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to provide it. My son, who is a landscaper in Portland, decided that we needed a better backyard. And so I says, well, okay, well, you can do this little thing. And no, we got to have something better than that. And he built us a really nice outdoor patio. The others have pitched in, but I'm really proud of my kids. They're doing really well. A lot better than their old man, for sure. Our first child, Denise, was born in 1966 in that Payne house. And now she lives in Nampa, Idaho, just a couple of miles from where I live right now. Our second son was born actually in Wyoming, in Worland, Wyoming, just before, and our third child, David, was born in Wyoming also, just before we moved back. Scott now is he's the IT director of the St. Luke's Hospital system in Boise, Idaho. He got his education on computers at the Carey High School. He did really well there. That was when the first computers started coming out in, what would it have been, 1980 something, 1979. When I was born, there was no electricity, there was no running water, there was no indoor plumbing. The bathroom was out under the tree. In the wintertime, that was kind of an interesting situation. I didn't have electricity in my house until I was 10. Did not have indoor plumbing till I was 10. Did not have a phone until I was 11. 1 phone in the house. So you see the interesting technology that I've been associated with. Now I can talk to someone in London, England by just simply picking up the phone. The computer system has been great. One of the things that I would think to advise people to try something new. This is what I told the kids, try it, see if you can do it. And so far I've been able to be somewhat converse in the the computer system. And David really enjoyed cooking. I think his mother taught him how to do that. And so now David is living in Shelley, Idaho. He has a catering business, which he's doing real well at. Before the pandemic came along, he was doing 54 events a week. So he was pretty busy. And now he's associated with a 2-year college over there, runs their cafeteria, and at the same time has a catering business out of that cafeteria. Chris was born in Idaho. We called him Mr. Fat Cheeks because he was kind of a plump little baby. He married a girl from Nevada. What was it called? Winnemucca. And they now have 5 kids. He became associated with the Shields Sporting Goods store in South Dakota, where his wife was working at the time as a specialist, a computer specialist, and liked that real well. And so when the opportunity came for him to be a Shields in Reno or Sparks, Nevada, he took that opportunity, and now he is the personnel director of a Shield store in Colorado Springs. Give you some idea of how big this store is. They have over 400 employees. And he really likes to do that. He thinks he's done real well. He just moved to Colorado Springs a year ago and doing well. Stephen is next. Stephen is our athletic one. He could never fall down. Whenever he started to fall, he would turn it into a somersault or a forward roll or something. He was our athlete. Did real well in the football program. The year that he was a senior, they played in the state playoffs championship, which hadn't been done for several years. And he and Chris were on the same team. And from that point on, this Carey football team has been successful. Mr. Kirkland was a very good coach, and now his son is a very good coach. And Mr. Cook was a good coach. His son now, Lee J, he's a very good coach. So you see the system still working well. Carey School is a very good school. It prepares the kids for the future. I'm proud of the kids that are going there. I'm proud of the staff that works there. They do a really good job compared to others that I know.
Layton, Utah.
Oh, yes. Stephen is in Layton, Utah. He works as a computer programmer. His wife works as a sales lady. Runs her own business as a salesman, and they're doing real well. And the next one down is Mark. He has he worked real well with our lawnmowing business there in Carey, and maybe that inspired him to become a lawnmower specialist because he became a landscaper, owns a landscaping company in Portland. 90 employees now.
No, 120.
120 employees now. Doing well. And Karen married a fellow from Portland, and she moved over there, and they have 4 children, and we have now 32 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. Our posterity is doing well. Karen just moved into a nice house in Portland. Her husband is a warehouse manager. I don't have any idea how many people.
For UPS.
For UPS store there, or fulfillment center, they call them. About as big as this one that we have now in Nampa. And that's the last of the kids. They're all doing real well. We moved here in 2013. We spent 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years, as senior couple missionaries at the Records Operations Centers, which is nothing more than a system that operates, watches films from the church headquarters in the Granite Mountain, and we go in and type up the information off of those films so that those can be transferred into a computer in Salt Lake, I guess, wherever it's at, and then whenever you want to find your relatives, all you have to do is go to that computer and find them.
Go to Family Search.
And go to Family Search and find it. And so that's what we've been doing until 2000 and, what was it?
4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago, 2015. And since then, we've just been working in the ward here in Carey and Nampa, 18th Ward.
Busy in our yard.
Cleaning our yard, trying to stay active, have a garden. No, I think I'm proud of the, like I have said, I'm proud of the Carey system. We had 15 graduated in our class when I graduated. There's been pretty much 15 every year since. I don't know where the kids come from, but they do. But the Carey system is working well. Does a good job. I'm proud of those. Proud of the school that I was in. Did it prepare me for the future? I don't know. I wanted to be a farmer. It never worked out. But it gave me the desire to work hard and try something new every day. I'm Kurtis Pyrah, and I graduated from the Carey High School in 1960.